Hello, and welcome to the Prismatica Podcast, the audio accompaniment for the Prismatica Magazine about LGBTQ plus people and by LGBTQ plus people. Each episode, we bring you a sci-fi, fantasy, or otherwise speculative fiction story about one or more people within the community. The story featured in this episode is The Middle by Andrew Olvera. No matter how early you arrive at an airport, your time spent there always seems spent in a haze where everything is a blur. You'll walk or jog alongside people you'll never see again. You'll sit beside and talk amongst others, never exchanging names because it is the land of the temporary. There's a feeling you might get, a sort of disorientation that when within the confines of an airport. It's called a liminal space, where reality just feels off. There are others like it. Hotels late at night, parking garages, or rest stops along the highway with no sign of civilization in either direction. Liminal space is the space in between. It's in the middle of here and there, betwixt point A and point B. So there I stood, by the desk of my flight's gate, in a sparse airport in the late evening, feeling a little out of breath from sprinting in fear that my plane would take off without me, only to discover that it had been delayed another 45 minutes. Gathering myself, I slunk to one of the nearest seats, sat down, and pulled out my phone, trying to ignore that overwhelming sense of offness. "You almost missed it," someone said. I looked up from my phone to see a man with bright red hair that was pulled back into a bun in the seats facing mine. He smirked as I returned a baffled stutter. "I'm only teasing," he said, still waiting for a verbal response. "Oh, yeah, I didn't know it was delayed," I said, feeling my face become warm. I dreaded my cheeks turning a shade of red that matched his hair. "What's your name?" he asked, breaking rule number 1 of airport etiquette. "Miguel. Yours?" I said, following suit. My bashful warmth was spreading across my entire body. He told me that his name was Elijah, and as fate would have it, we were both stopping in Eugene, Oregon. Elijah was going to stay with his sister for the summer to help with her children while she went through a divorce. He was a college student and had taken the summer off. I was returning home from Denver, Colorado, after my brother's firstborn child. A beginning and an end while we coexisted in the middle. I could hardly believe it when the announcement sounded for the arrival of our flight. Our conversation seemed to have lasted hours, yet it didn't feel long enough. The plane unloaded, and we finally boarded, shuffling down the chute like sheep into the cabin where sickeningly enthusiastic flight attendants waited to usher us in. When everyone got to their seats, I peered around for Elijah's bright red hair, only to discover that he was a half a dozen rows in front of me, and from the looks of it, there was an old woman already passed out against his shoulder. I was fortunate enough to be seated next to a confident-looking man in a business suit, or so I thought until he spent the time from our takeoff to our subsequent landing attempting to persuade me to buy into what I could only assume was a pyramid scheme. Elijah and I met once more at the baggage claim. He was already standing in the sloppy circle of people, also waiting for their luggage, all of whom were looking worn out from the long day of travel. "You, got a little drool on you," I said, gesturing to Elijah's shoulder as I walked up. He laughed and rolled his eyes dramatically, wiping at the spot with the sleeve of his sweater. "I wish I could say it was the first time, but apparently I gave off the 'please fall asleep on me' vibe," he replied, then went back to eyeballing the belt of his bag amid 20-some suitcases that all looked vaguely similar to one another. It didn't take long before his suitcase finally made its way down the line. It was a bright green, hard shell case with stickers scattered all over it. He pulled it from the belt, and it was obvious he wasn't a light packer with the force he had to put into dragging it off the conveyor. "So, I guess this is farewell," he said, pulling out the handle from the top of his suitcase. "Yeah," I sighed, hesitant to speak my next words. "What do you, think this is the chance of us seeing each other again?" I visibly cringed at myself, feeling a mixture of surprise at my forwardness and mortified at opening myself up for rejection. "Whatever they are, I hope they fall in our favor," Elijah said. "So, until next time?" I nodded with a silly grin on my face, then noticed my own suitcase coming down the line. Oh, I stammered, breaking away and went to the belt to gather my belongings. Unfortunately, by the time I had pulled my suitcase from the belt and looked back to Elijah, he was already gone. I took a minute to scold myself for not getting his number, then reluctantly made for the pickup area to catch a bus into town. Dark, heavy rain clouds sprawled out over the entirety of the city of Eugene, and the familiar scent of a fresh rainfall blew through the air. It was the early morning, almost a week after I had returned from my trip. I sat at my desk in the living room of my small apartment, nested in a cozy neighborhood near downtown. Around me were the 5 formerly stray cats I had taken in throughout the years. Yogurt and Stardust, the eldest of the pack, laid on the only free space of my large desk, while Rainbow curled up in my lap, and Cleopatra and Jonathan slept at my feet. Stardust stared out at me with a look of judgment, as if she somehow knew I was scouring Facebook for anyone named Elijah who lived in Denver. I had come up empty and closed the browser in a huff of defeat, opting to finish the last few sips of my coffee and get ready for work at my boring office job for an insurance company. Later that day, while I was logging in numbers, I caught myself thinking about him again. I felt like the stereotypical lovesick schoolboy pining away for the mysterious new kid. I guess, in a way, I was, but there was something peculiar about it. I'd begun to see him, though it never was him. I'd see him walk across aisles in Target late after I'd gotten off work when there were very few customers, or in the gas station when I would grab snacks to eat while binge-watching my newest show. Brief glimpses of that fiery red hair flashed in my peripheral vision, but every time I'd turn to look at it, it was gone. By the time the week was done, I'd practically forgotten about Elijah, and about his stupid, beautiful hair, and about his stupid, cute freckles, and about his stupid, amazing bone structure. The moment I had purged every stupid thing about him from my brain was while walking through the doors of the laundromat I frequented, which was convenient because it was also exactly the moment when I finally laid eyes on him again. For real. In the flesh. Standing right there in front of me. Doing his laundry. Looking stupid and beautiful just like I remembered. In the instinctive manner you do when someone walks in a room, he looks up to see me. His face broke slowly into a smile, and I looked at him with my jaw agape. "Miguel?" he said, and my stomach erupted in butterflies. He said my name. "How?" I muttered, still not entirely sure that I wasn't dreaming. "Small, world, huh?" he said. "I would have called, but, yeah, same," I replied. Remembering that I was still in the doorway, I slung my bag of laundry back over my shoulder and walked over to Elijah. "How's your sister doing?" I asked. I knew little of how to navigate small talk, but I figured it was a good place to start. He let go of a sigh of exasperation and told me about how she was having to hire a lawyer to fight for custody of their children, and how each night generally ended with he and his sister staying up far too late, drinking far too much wine. He asked of my brother and his newborn son, who were doing both fantastic, and he was the happiest man alive, finally becoming a father. It was weird how our initial awkwardness dissipated once we got going. It felt so natural talking to him. Like, right there was where I was meant to be. The laundromat wasn't the middle anymore, between dirty clothes and clean. It was the beginning of us, and the end of a search that I think was a lot longer than only those first few weeks of summer. But then the beginning ended with the buzz of a dryer. It was the end of a cycle in many ways, and that meant he had to go, leaving me in the middle once more. He stuffed his pile of clothes into an old plastic hamper that was cracked all throughout, and then he left. "So, same time next week?" he asked. I knew my face must have lit up with the laugh it evoked. He laughed a warm, soft laugh that exposed his near-perfect teeth. His eyes crinkled at the sides as he watched me form a coherent thought. "I'd like that," I finally managed to say. "Then it's a date." Elijah confirmed with a nod and a smile. I had to look away, for I feared I'd implode from the anxious butterflies that continued to multiply deep down in the pit of my stomach. Then, once I'd look away, I felt it silly to look back and watch him go, because that would be so clingy. But he was, well, I was weak-willed and did so despite myself. And he was already gone. Elijah and I would go on to share our time spent in that laundromat from the following weeks. Each time he was already there when I arrived. Each time he left me in the middle. And each time he'd part with the same words. So, same time next week? It quickly became the thing I most looked forward to in my week. I even found myself telling my cats about them as I drifted off to sleep. Stardust still thought me too much for her to deal with, still giving me those looks of judgment, only now from the pillow beside mine. Cleopatra, on the other hand, clung to every word. She was always the one who indulged me in idle gossip, but Rainbow and Yogurt were only there for butt scratches. And then there was Jonathan, who stayed up long into the night, causing a ruckus off in the living room. His nails clattered against the hardwood flooring, and every so often I'd hear him crash into something. Elijah and I had learned much about each other in those weeks of summer. He was going to school to become a veterinarian, knew enough Klingon to be embarrassed, liked pineapple on pizza, and had a collection of poems that he'd written daily since he was 6. Each laundry day, I found myself falling deeper in love with him, to the point I never thought possible before, and I poured my heart out to him. I told him things I never thought possible. I was still afraid of the dark, was completely incapable of telling someone no, thought Santa was real well into my adolescence, and actually liked the Star Wars prequels. It broke my heart then on a particularly rainy Oregonian afternoon when Elijah didn't speak those parting words at the doorway of the empty laundromat. Summer's over next week, he said, looking at me solemnly. I'll be leaving for Denver tomorrow. It hit me like a bus. I'd known our time was temporary, but I think I'd willingly forgotten it. Like maybe if I wished for it enough, the day wouldn't come. I stood up from the old wooden bench and approached him, barely able to form words. Tomorrow? I've got school to get back to, he said, looking down at his feet, seeming like he wanted to say more. And of course, he had to leave, and I couldn't hold that against him despite how I wanted to. These summer months were some of the best I'd ever had, and I wanted to be selfish. What do you think the chances of us seeing each other again? I asked, recalling the words from our departure in the airport all that time ago. It took everything I had not to choke up. Elijah managed to laugh, closed his eyes, and took a breath. Whatever they are, I hope they fall in our favor, he recited, wiping a tear from my eye. His hand radiated a warmth I wanted to cling to so desperately. I looked at him, my eyes undoubtedly bloodshot and teary, and then he kissed me. He took my face in his hands and pressed his lips to mine. It was a passionate kiss, long in the making. I wanted to stay in that moment, but it undoubtedly had to end. He let go, and his hand slid down to hold mine. I'm sorry, Miguel, he told me. No, I wanted you to do that, I insisted, oblivious to his true meaning. He laughed a hearty laugh this time and shook his head at me. That's not what I meant, he said, then paused in thought. You know those places like this one here where things feel kind of strange? My confusion must have been apparent because he continued. It's called a liminal space, he told me. A place in between places, where their existence is more about where you'll be next or where you were before. Do you get what I mean? Like an airport? I asked, and he gave me a nod. Well, some of these spots, the liminal spaces, aren't just connecting two separate places. Some connect more than that, he told me, watching my confusion grow. Watch this, he said, letting go of one hand. He turned to face the doorway of the laundromat and held his hand through it. As his fingertips passed the threshold, they fragmented apart. They became like dust drifting in the air. He went further, stepping away from me completely, and soon his entire hand and half of his forearm had done the same. Instinctively, and once the initial shock subsided, I pulled his arm back into the building. I inspected it to determine the damage, but his arm was now whole again. Did that really just happen? I asked. Like I said, some connect more. So you're not from your world, no. Are you an alien? No, not an alien. He chuckled. Think another dimension, another reality. Whoa. I know. You'd think 20-some years of reading comics would prepare you for a thing like that, I said, still dumbfounded and processing everything at a moderate to low rate of speed. I had to take a step back, leaning against one of the dryers to take it all in. It was a while before I could speak again. So what does that mean? I said. For us. And then he became solemn once more. I don't rightly know. I learned about this as a boy, and while I haven't learned much since, I know that these places don't always connect the same two worlds. I suppose it's like the planets revolving around the sun. Sometimes things just line up, he told me, returning his hands to my own. Maybe next year they'll still be connected, or maybe they won't. But will you try? I asked. Next summer, will you come back? Of course I will, he said, and kissed me again. This time it was tender and brief. But tonight, he continued, we still have tonight. And so we did. We stayed there in that empty laundromat long into the night, long past the point where he and I could hold our eyes open. He sat on top of the dryers, and I lay across them with my head in his lap. He ran his fingers through my thick, black hair as we soaked in each other's company. Keep doing that, I'm bound to fall asleep, I warned, with words interspaced by sleepy breaths. How I wish I could soothe you to sleep upon the comfort of a couch, he professed. The pain in his eyes was unbearable, and it twisted my stomach in knots. It'll happen, at all. One day. It'll happen, I promise. I reached up to wrap my hand over his. I want to believe that, he said, but I've not learned barely a thing from years of looking into all this. There's always a way, I said. Even if I have to get bitten by a radioactive time traveler or something. You may be onto something there, he laughed. I sat up, noticing the sun had begun to rise over the rooftops and pine trees, then looked back to Elijah. You have to leave soon, don't you? He lowered his head before speaking. Yeah, he admitted. Gotta be to the airport in an hour. He dropped his feet down and lowered himself to the floor. It pained me to say that, but it was obvious we couldn't stay in this middle forever. Elijah went to his hamper, which looked sad as it was in its dilapidated state, and took it over to the entryway while I followed close behind. He readjusted himself, flattened out the wrinkles in his shirt, took a deep breath, and stepped backwards, now only a foot away from the door. Being the forward one for once, I pulled him into my embrace and kissed him. My knees went weak as he dragged his hands down my back, and then back up along my sides until his hands met my face. If ever there were a kiss goodbye, this were it. When he finally pulled away from me, we stepped back and grinned like sheepish schoolboys. It was a moment before either of us spoke. Well, this is goodbye, I guess, I said finally. Not goodbye, he corrected. How about until next time? Until next time, I repeated. And then he took his final step through the doorway. His body broke into a billion tiny flecks as he went off to his own world. It was the end of our summer together, but hopefully, if the odds turned out in favor, we might have a beginning once more. Thank you for listening to the Prismatica Podcast. This episode's piece was read by Edmund, also known as Knight. It was written by Andrew Olvera. If you enjoyed this episode, please rate and review our podcast. It really helps other people find the podcast, and our staff and contributors love the feedback. You can find the show on iTunes, Google Play, or your podcast app of choice. We're also on Facebook, Tumblr, and Twitter, or you can go check out our website, prismaticamagazine.com, to find out how you can become a contributor. Thanks for tuning in, and see you all next time.